Ma'am, would you please stand in the witness box?
Yes.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Thank you.
Please state your name for the record. Spell your first and last names.
Kathy Jorrie, Kathyjorrie.
Ms. Jorrie, good morning.
Good morning, Your
Let
Honor.
me provide you with some instructions, which I give to every witness in every case. The first of which is to please sit back and relax.
Thank you.
The second of which is to speak in a loud voice. That'll help us out. The third, try to avoid answering questions or They can be very confusing. And the last, please wait until you hear an entire question before you even start to answer it. In our daily lives, a lot of us are used to interrupting each other because we think we can anticipate the whole question. But in a courtroom, it's important to wait for the entire question to be asked before even starting to answer it. Is that all okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Brazil, direct exam.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Jorrie.
Good morning.
Please tell us what you do for a living
I am a lawyer.
and where are you employed?
I'm a partner at the law firm of Luce Forward, Hamilton and Scripps, and I'm in charge of their Los Angeles office.
Ms. Jorrie, in June of 2009, were you requested to draft an employment contract between Michael Joseph Jackson and Dr. Conrad Murray?
Yes. What did you refer to the contract as? I'm sorry, if you could restate your question.
An employment contract?
No.
Contract for services?
Was not an employment contract. It was a contract for services.
And who requested that you draft a contract for services involving Mr. Jackson and Dr. Conrad Murray?
My client, AEG Live.
Is it usual and customary to have an outside legal service such as yourself prepare contracts for a corporation?
Yes, it is.
Were you provided with the basic information in order to create a draft of the contract for services between the parties?
Yes.
And who provided you with that information?
A gentleman named Tim Woolley who worked with AEG Live.
When did you begin drafting the contract for services between the parties?
To my best recollection, it was in May, June timeframe.
So describe for me how the drafting of the contract began.
Well, first I received information from Mr. Woolley about the basic terms of the agreement. Then I took that information after asking questions and getting answers from him, and I drafted the agreement.
And what did you do with the agreement once you completed your draft?
I emailed a copy of the agreement to Mr. Woolley and others at AEG Live to review.
At some point, did your draft of the contract reach Dr. Murray, to your knowledge?
Yes.
And how did that come about?
In my email to Mr. Woolley, I asked him to review, provide comments, and if he was satisfied with the contract, to please forward it to Mr. Murray, to Dr. Murray.
And to your knowledge, did Mr. Woolley forward the contract or the draft that you had created to Dr. Murray?
Yes.
And how did you become aware that that was happening?
I received a call from Dr. Murray to discuss the draft that he had received from Mr. Woolley.
And then at some point subsequent, did you have conversations or communication directly with Conrad Murray through telephonic contact?
Yes.
Did you also have direct email contact back and forth with Conrad Murray concerning any future revisions to the draft?
Yes.
Ms. Jorrie, does it sound accurate that you first created the draft and sent it to Mr. Woolley on June 15th of 2009?
I did email it on June 15 of 2009 to Mr. Woolley.
Generally, the contract provisions included a start date, correct?
Are you asking about this contract or general?
This contract. Specifically, I'm focusing on the contract that you drafted between Mr. Jackson and Conrad Murray. What was the start date for Conrad Murray's services?
The start date was when all three parties signed the contract, because the contract specifically stated that it wasn't effective until signed by Dr. Murray, AEG Live, Dr. Murray's company, GCA, and Michael Jackson himself. So that's a little bit of a tricky question, because the parties had agreed that the payment to Dr. Murray, when and if the contract became valid and enforceable, would start as of May 1st, 2009, so he would be paid retroactively.
That was what I was getting to.
Thank you
for clarifying that. So, irrespective of the contract becoming activated, Dr. Murray was contemplating compensation from a period retroactively May 1st, 2009. Is that accurate?
Yes.
What was the agreed upon compensation that was captured in the contract for Dr. Murray?
$150,000 a month for the term of the contract.
And what was the term of the contract to be? We know that it would begin his compensation May 1st, 2009. What was the provision in the contract regarding the end of his services?
In the initial draft of the contract, the end of the services would have been September 30th, 2009, and through subsequent discussions with Dr. Murray, the end of the term was modified in the next draft to be, if I recall correctly, March 6, 2010, which would have been the end of the second leg of the This Is It shows at the O2 Arena.
Was there a negotiation point concerning the payment that you've just described between you and Dr. Murray?
There was.
Describe that, please.
Well, that conversation occurred, let's see, that was actually the second round of changes, so it would have been the second day in which I spoke to Dr. Murray. And the conversation that I had with him was he contacted me on my cell phone, and he had a number of revisions that he would like me to make to the contract, focusing on that particular change. Dr. Murray had requested that I modify the contract to have an end date on March 6, 2010. And I asked him whether or not he spoke to Michael Jackson about that. And he told me he had. He spoke with Michael Jackson. Indeed, he told me he had reviewed the entire agreement with Michael Jackson. And I asked him whether Michael Jackson has indicated a willingness to pay the $150,000 a month during that period of time, because there was a lag period of a few months.
And let me stop you for a second
Sure.
there. So you're referring to the period of October, November, and December when the performances at the O2 Arena would be on hiatus. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And
Clarify the term hiatus for some of us, please.
yes, Ms. Jorrie, the concert would be on a break during the months of October, November, and December. There would be no performances by the This Is It concert, correct?
That's right.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, Dr. Murray was requesting that he be paid during that period, correct?
Yes.
And you were stating that you had queried Dr. Murray whether he had discussed payment with Mr. Jackson during the downtime from the concert, correct?
That's correct.
And how did that resolve?
Dr. Murray explained to me that he had spoke to Michael Jackson about that, and yes, Michael said he was willing to pay for Dr. Murray's services during that hiatus, and all the way through March 6, 2010.
just so I'm clear on the negotiating and drafting time frame, you created your first draft and sent it off for approval to Mr. Woolley and Conrad Murray on June 15th, 2009, correct?
Correct.
And the final contract was signed and returned to you by Dr. Murray on June 24th, 2009, correct?
Yes, in the evening.
So in that time period, we're talking about your communication with Dr. Murray directly, telephonically, and by email would have occurred between June 15th and June 24th. Is that accurate?
Correct.
During your telephonic conversation with Dr. Murray while you were discussing the changes in the compensation that you just described for us, what other negotiation conversations did you have with Dr. Murray on that date?
So the second time with the
Yes.
second draft.
The second draft.
He requested that the date where it said dated as of be May 1st in the contract, signifying that his compensation would be retroactive to May 1st. So I made that change to the contract and then dated the contract on the date of signature that he intended to sign.
And you also mentioned there was a change to the company name involving Conrad Murray. Is that accurate?
We had two conversations about changes to the contract. We had a conversation on June 18, which preceded the conversation I just described to you, where Dr. Murray and I spoke about several different things, including changes to the contracts, questions I had about the contract, etc. And then we had another conversation on June 23rd, because on June 18, after we spoke, I revised the contract, I emailed it to Dr. Murray, and then he called me again about that draft with some further changes.